Hey, Shalom, Israel. You live with the Israelite School of Universal Practical Knowledge. Priest and Captain Saga War coming to y'all live from Memphis, Tennessee. We're in the fifth night of the Feast of Hachaanakah, the Feast of the Rededication. I said, when I went live Wednesday night, first night of the feast, I said I would try to go live every night to break down a little bit about Hachaanakah, give brothers and sisters some history about it, and some understanding of why it's important that we remember the heroic acts of the brothers who fought with the Maccabees during the revolution against the Greeks that were ruling over our land thousands of years ago. We were able, through the power of the Most High in Christ, through the heroism of brothers who stood with the Most High, stood with the laws of that the Most High gave to our forefathers, were able to fight, to reclaim, and to stand strong on what the Most High had given us to make us a great nation, to establish us separate and holy from all the other peoples on the earth. We're living in a time right now where the truth and knowledge of who we are, where we come from, and what our purpose is on the earth is trying, to be systematically wiped out or whitewashed, so to speak. You understand? The tactics of our oppressor has gotten more and more sophisticated as time went on. Of course, when we were first brought into this land of America, they whipped our backs, they beat us, they forced us to take on English names, forced us to forget the language of our forefathers, you understand, forced us to learn about their history, their culture, and become what they wanted us to be. Look at our brothers and sisters down there in Latin America, you understand, they suffered the same tragedies, forced to, learn to speak the Spanish language, adopt the religion of Catholicism. You look at what happened with the Native American Indians. You understand, the white man set up boarding schools, had a philosophy called, kill the Indian, save the man, where they put the Native brothers in these boarding schools, which literally beat, the Native culture, Native heritage, Native pride out of them, and tried to make them what the white man wanted them to be in their image. And because of it, in the year 2020, we as a people are, destroyed and scattered mentally, emotionally, spiritually. And we're living in a time where the Most High is calling for his children to come back to him. And very much like it was during the time of the Maccabees, during the time where the Feast of Hachaanakah was first established, this nation needs brave men. This nation needs, brothers and sisters who are heroic, who are not afraid, to give their life, to lose whatever society says you'll lose for taking a stance that is unpopular. And so it is important that during this feast, we go through and remember the lives, and the stories of the brothers and sisters who stood so strong all those years ago, because we are going to need that as part of our arsenal, as part of, who we are and how we live, in order for us to go forward and to really stand strong with the Most High, stand for our people in this time. All right. Without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and go into the book of First Maccabees, the 5th chapter. If you brothers and sisters have been tuning in every night that I've been going into these scriptures, I started in the book of First Maccabees, the 1st chapter, gave the history and the backdrop of what was going on in and around the land of Israel leading up to the Greeks coming into power. Chapter 2 covered how the Greeks, when they took power in the land of Israel or in that province after Alexander the Great, they set up kings. You understand? And one of those kings was a man named Antiochus. When Antiochus took power, he passed policies and passed laws which made practicing our culture and being an Israelite illegal. And during the time when they started to enforce these policies, a lot of our people, sold out. A lot of our people went along with the heathens and, didn't want no trouble, didn't want no problems. They just gave master whatever it is that he wanted. And then we got into chapter 3 and 4 on the 3rd night, going into the brother Mattathias and his sons, and how Mattathias was a brother who, in the face of sure destruction, stood with the Most High, stood with the laws, and would not allow for himself to be counted amongst the men who who turned their back on the Most High, turned their back on our laws, turned their back on our culture. And because of the heroism of Mattathias, he rose up his sons, one namely Judas Maccabees, who took over after his father and led military campaigns against the Greeks and these other nations for us to be able to reclaim our capital with Jerusalem, rebuild the temple, reestablish the righteous holy ordinances that the Most High gave our people to really establish us as a nation with a culture that was different from these other nations. So now what we're going to read into in First Maccabees chapter 5 and chapter 6 is what immediately took place after Judas had took back over Jerusalem and we rebuilt the temple. And it goes to show you why us coming together and standing on who we are, standing in for our laws, standing for our culture is such a threat to this society. I know I've heard often over the years that I've been in the truth, I heard brothers and sisters who lack, understanding of history and how we found ourselves to be in the condition we're in 2020. A lot of times people say, man, why do white people hate us so much? Why are we such a threat to America that they feel like they have to, not only did they put us in slavery, not only did they, lynch us from trees, but then when we got so-called freedom after the Civil War, they passed Jim Crow laws, you understand? And they passed the 13th Amendment, which made it, slavery legal if you were committed of a crime. Then they established a prison industrial complex. And if that wasn't enough, in the 50s and the 60s, they started to, use government programs to divide our families. In the 70s, they brought in abortion, they brought in heroin, they brought in, crack cocaine. And we look at all of the history of how much this country has been against us and this government has been against us. And a lot of our people say, man, why us? Why do they hate us so much? But if you understood the history that we're about to read tonight, you would understand that keeping us down, keeping us oppressed is the key to the powers that be continuing to run the earth. Because what we're going to read tonight, when we stand up for who we are, when we stand up for the Most High, when we give our lives to the Creator and stand in the laws and the culture that He gave us, it sends a shockwave through the rest of the world, through the rest of the earth, to everybody that you can stand up against oppression, to everybody that you don't have to live being a slave to another man. You understand? And so right now, the earth is in a certain order. There's a certain hierarchy that exists on the earth amongst the other nations. And you have the Europeans or the Caucasians, they are on top. After them, there's the Chinese that's creeping in and claiming their stake. You understand? Then you got the Arabs. You understand? Then you have other nations amongst the Asians. You understand? Then you have the East Indians. They have some nuclear power. They have powers. Then you got African nations. Well, the very bottom of that hierarchy is blacks, Latinos, and Native Indians. And there is a concerted effort to make sure that we stay on the bottom. And the only way we're allowed to rise is if we adopt an identity that fits amongst these other nations. But when we stand outside of all of those nations, and when we stand on who we are, stand on our history, and stand on our culture, it causes a power. It causes I hate to use this term, but it causes a paradigm shift to the hierarchy. Blacks, Latinos, and Native Indians coming together and standing on who we are and uniting, it causes the entire hierarchy of the other nations to completely become astray. You understand? And we're going to read about that tonight. And hopefully by reading this and understanding what transpired during the days of this Maccabean revolution, you'll understand why there's such a concerted effort by the oppressor and the other nations to make sure that we stay down, that we stay lost, that we never find out who we are. Everybody understands? So I'm going to go ahead and get into it. If any brothers and sisters have any questions, all you got to do is type them in, type your questions, and I can see it on the screen. I can address them. But right now we're going into First Maccabees chapter 5. We're going to start at verse 1, all right? Again, this is right after we took back the temple, right after they had the rededication feast, and they partied and they sacrificed for the space of 8 days, and they made it a memorial for us to always keep this feast, to always remember what the Lord did for us in the time when we fought back against our oppressors and took our land back. All right, and again, we are in the 5th night of the Feast of Hachaanakah, the Feast of the Rededication. First Maccabees chapter 5, verse 1. It says, now when the nations round about heard the altar was built and the sanctuary renewed as before, it displeased them very much. When we came back into our homeland, when we rebuilt our temple, it displeased all the other nations that were round about us in the land where we were living. Verse 2, wherefore they thought to destroy the generation of Jacob that was among them, and thereupon they began to slay and destroy the people. So when we get victory over the Greeks, these other nations who were also under the Greeks were angry, and they started to go to war with us. This is not Israelites fighting the Greeks. This is Israelites fighting against the Edomites, fighting against the Moabites, fighting against the other nations who were in the land that were also being ruled over by Greeks. Verse 3, then Judah fought against the children of Esau and Idumea and Arabatim, because they besieged Gael, and he gave them a great overthrow and abated their courage and took their spoils. So these Edomites, again, there goes Esau. Esau looking for an opportunity to keep us down, looking for an opportunity to overthrow us or to oppress us. Judah smashed down their little revolt. Verse 4, also he remembered the injury of the children of Ben, who had been a snare and an offense unto the people, and that they lay in wait for them in the ways. So while we was, trying to reclaim our land, we had enemies who was pulling raids and attacking us on different trade routes and things like that. And Judas remembered them. Verse 5, he shut them up therefore in the towers and encamped against them and destroyed them utterly, and burned the towers of that place with fire and all that were therein. Afterward, he passed over to the children of Ammon, where he found a mighty power and much people with Timothy as their captain. So he fought many battles with them, till at length they were discomfited before him, and he smote them. And when he had taken Jazer with the towns belonging thereto, he returned unto Judea. Then the heathen that were at Gilead assembled themselves together against the Israelites that were in their quarters to destroy them, but they fled to the fortress of Dathema and sent letters unto Judas and his brethren. The heathen that are round about us are assembled together against us to destroy us. Now these are some brothers and sisters get trapped in the city of Gilead, where some they were in the fortress of Dathema, and some heathens came against them. Where they sent word to Judas and his brothers, we surrounded these heathens are trying to destroy us. Verse 11, and they were preparing to come and take the fortress whereunto we fled, Timothy is being captain of their hosts. Come now, therefore, and deliver us from their hands, for many of us are slain. Yea, all our brethren that were in the places of Tobi are put to death. Their wives and their children also they have carried away captives and borne away their stuff, and they have destroyed there about 1,000 men. While these letters were yet reading, behold, there came other messengers from Galilee with their clothes rent, who reported on this wise, and said, they of Ptolemais and of Tyrus and Zidon and all Galilee of the Gentiles are assembled together against us to consume us. So there's all at the one time, all of the word is coming down across, across the land of Israel, that all these heathens are coming against us, that all of these battles are being waged, and we are in, at siege on different fronts. You understand? Now, again, these are nations that are not Greeks. These are not Greek people who are coming against us, but these are other nations who are siding with the Greeks to destroy us because of the threat that we are if we are allowed to be in power. The threat that we are if we're allowed to exist in our strength. And it just goes to show you today, the same way these other nations gathered together against us in this time, in that time, they are gathered together against us in this time as well. You understand? This is First Maccabees chapter 5, verse 16. Now, when Judas and the people heard these words, they assembled a great congregation together to consult what they should do for their brethren that were in trouble, and assaulted of them. Then said Judas unto Simon his brother, choose thee out men, and go and deliver thy brethren that are in Galilee. For I and Jonathan my brother will go into the country of Gilead. So he left Joseph the son of Zacharias and Azarias, captains of the people, with the remnant of the host in Judea to keep it. So he left a force of men in Judea to keep the city while they went to go fight this battle. Verse 19, unto whom he gave commandments, saying, take ye the charge of this people, and see that ye make not war against the heathen until the time that we come again. Now unto Simon were given 3,000 men to go into Galilee, and unto Judas 8,000 men for the country of Gilead. Then went Simon into Galilee, where he fought many battles with the heathen, so that the heathen were discomfited by him. That word discomfited means overcome. I mean, they fought with these heathens until the heathens were overcome by them. Everybody understands. Verse 23, and those that were in Galilee and in Arbatis with their wives and their children and all that they had, took he away with him and brought them into Judea with great joy. Judas Maccabeus also and his brother Jonathan went over Jordan and traveled 3 days' journey into the wilderness, where they met with the Nabathites, who came unto them in a peaceable manner and told them everything that had happened to their brethren in the land of Gilead, and how that many of them were shut up in Bosra and Bosor and Alima, Casphor, Maked, and Karnaim. All these cities are strong and great, and that they were shut up in the rest of the cities of the country of Gilead, and that against tomorrow they had appointed to bring their hosts against the forts, and to take them and destroy them all in one day. Hereupon Judas and his host turned suddenly by the way of the wilderness unto Bosra. And when he had won the city, he slew all the males with the edge of the sword, and took all their spoils, and burned the city with fire. From whence he removed by night, and went till he came to the fortress. And betimes in the morning they looked up, and behold, there was innumerable people bearing ladders and other engines of war to take the fortress, for they assaulted them. So Judas and them, they come up on the scene, and the heathens, the enemies, have ladders and all types of war machines to climb the walls of the city where the Israelites are. Everybody understands? All right. This is 1 Maccabees chapter 5, verse 31. When Judas therefore saw that the battle was begun, and that the cry of the city went up to heaven with trumpets and a great sound, he said unto his host, fight this day for your brethren. So he went forth behind them in 3 companies, who sounded their trumpets and cried with prayer. Then the host of Timotheus, knowing that it was Maccabeus, fled from him. Wherefore he smote them with a great slaughter, so that there were killed of them that day about 8,000 men. This done, Judas turned aside to Mospha, and after he had assaulted it, he took and slew all the males therein, and received the spoils thereof, and burnt it with fire. From thence went he and took Casphon, Maged, Bosor, and other cities of the country of Gilead. After these things gathered Timotheus another host, and encamped against Raphon beyond the brook. So Judas sent men to espy the host, who brought him word, saying, all the heathen that be round about us are assembled unto them, even a very great host. That espy is like to spy in old Quaker English, all right? They send scouts to go spy and get an account, do basically reconnaissance, do recon, and come back and give a report on the enemies. They came back and said, man, it's a great army that's gathered against us. Verse 39, he have also hired the Arabians to help them, and they have pitched their tents beyond the brook, ready to come and fight against thee. Upon this, Judas went to meet them. You understand? So they got a great army. They hired the Arabs. Again, there you go, other nations joining in, trying to oppress us, trying to kill us, trying to overthrow us. Judas and his men went out to battle, went out to meet them. Verse 40, then Timotheus said unto the captains of his host, when Judas and his host come near the brook, if he pass over first unto us, we shall not be able to withstand him, for he will mightily prevail against us. So this is their battle strategy. They're saying to themselves, if we let the force with Judas come across the brook, we ain't going to be able to deal with them. But if he be afraid and camp beyond the river, we shall go over unto him and prevail against him. Now when Judas came near the brook, he caused the scribes of the people to remain by the brook, unto whom he gave commandments, saying, suffer no man to remain in the camp, but let all come to the battle. So when they get down there by that brook, Judah said, listen, everybody coming across this water, everybody coming across this brook to this battle, nobody going to stay behind to keep a record or to keep account. You understand? Verse 43, so he went over first unto them, and all the people after him. Then all the heathen, being discomfited before him, cast away their weapons and fled unto the temple that was at Carnaim. But they took the city and burned the temple with all that were therein. Thus was Carnaim subdued, neither could they stand any longer before Judas. Then Judas gathered together all the Israelites that were in the country of Gilead, from the least unto the greatest, even their wives and their children and their stuff, a very great host, to the end they might come into the land of Judea. Now when they came unto Ephron, this was a great city in the way as they should go, very well fortified, they could not turn from it, either on the right hand or the left, but must needs pass through the midst of it. So as they're on their journey back to the land of Judea, they come across a fortress, and the fortress is in the land of Ephron, and there's no way to go around this fortress. If you want to get to the land of Judea on this route, you got to go through this fortress. So what does that mean? The fortress got to fall. Everybody understand? Verse 47, then they of the city shut them out and stopped up the gates with stones. Whereupon Judah sent unto them in a peaceable manner, saying, let us pass through your land to go into our own country, and none shall do you any hurt. We will only pass through on foot. Howbeit they would not open unto him. Wherefore Judas commanded a proclamation to be made throughout the host, that every man should pitch his tent in that place where he was. So the soldiers pitched and assaulted the city all that day and all that night, till at the length the city was delivered into his hands, who then slew all the males with the edge of the sword, and razed the city, and took the spoils thereof, and passed through the city over them that were slain. After this went they over Jordan into the great plain before Bethsan. And Judas gathered together those that came behind, and exhorted the people all the way through, till they came into the land of Judea. So they went up to Mount Sion with joy and gladness, where they offered burnt offerings, because not one of them was slain until they had returned in peace. Now what time as Judas and Jonathan were in the land of Gilead, and Simon his brother in Galilee before Ptolemaeus, Joseph the son of Zacharias and Azarias, captain of the garrisons, heard of the valiant acts and warlike deeds which they had done. Wherefore they said, let us also get us a name, and go fight against the heathen that are round about us. And when they had given charge unto the garrison that was with them, they went toward Hamnea. Then came Gorgias and his men out of the city to fight against them. And so it was that Joseph and Azarias were put to flight, and pursued unto the borders of Judea. And there were slain that day of the people of Israel about 2,000 men. Thus was there a great overthrow among the children of Israel, because they were not obedient unto Judas and his brethren, but thought to do some valiant act. Now, if you remember, Judas, when he left out, he told these two brothers, hold down the fort, do not go out to fight until we come back. But these men heard of the glory that Judas and Jonathan had gotten. They heard of the glory, you understand, of Simon and his brothers down in Galilee before Ptolemaeus. And they said, well, shit, we want some glory too. They disobeyed the orders of Judas, and they went out and they fought and got their asses whipped, which goes to show you that following orders is always been a great part of the success of our nation. Following orders and doing what it is that the Lord said to do, or following the men who the Lord has put in charge, has always been pivotal when it comes to leadership in our nation. Even to today, if you think that you could, a brother or a sister, and you can have success in your life and not follow orders, you think the Lord gonna be with you and you do your own thing, you are sadly mistaken, and you do not understand the lessons that the history of our nation has to teach us. And in the earth today, Commander General Hachaanakah is the brother who the Lord has established to be in charge of this nation. And when he gives an order, brothers and sisters should follow it. You understand? When the men that he's given charge give orders, brothers and sisters should follow it. You should not think that you know best, or the Lord is dealing with you and rebel against the orders that the men of the Lord give you. These brothers, this brother Joseph and Azarias, these brothers did not take heed to that lesson, and it cost 2,000 men their lives. First Maccabees chapter 5, verse 62. Moreover, these men came not of the seed of those by whose hand deliverance was given unto Israel. Howbeit the man Judas and his brethren were greatly renowned in the sight of all Israel and of all the heathen wheresoever their name was heard of. And it's always been that way, man. Whenever the Lord established a man, that man's authority meant something. Coming in the name of that man meant something. I mean, you can go into the New Testament with Christ. When them cats tried to go out and preach in Acts the 13th chapter, them cats tried to go out and preach and tried to, no, that Acts 13, I believe it was Acts 13, 16 through 19. Them cats tried to go out there and tried to speak, and they trying to cast out demons. The brother with the demon said, listen, I know you're Hachaanakah, and Paul I know, but I don't know who the hell you are. You can't, the spirit of the Lord will not allow for a man who's not authorized to be recognized, man. You trying to get yourself some vainglory or do something on your own accord, establish a name for yourself. The Lord is not going to be with you. You understand? And the Lord showed that he established a reputation with the Israelite School of Universal Practical Knowledge from those men he raised up in 1969. And the only man who maintained what those men raised up was Commander General Your Honor. You think you can go outside of that rank, outside of that structure, and the Lord will be dealing with you, man? You're foolish. As foolish as Joseph, the son of Zacharias, as foolish as Azarias, who was in charge of the garrisons. Everybody understand? First Maccabees 5 and 64. Insomuch as the people assembled unto them with joyful acclamations. Verse 65. Afterward went Judas forth with his brethren and fought against the children of Esau in the land toward the south, where he smote Hebron and the towns thereof, and pulled down the fortress of it, and burned the towers thereof round about. From thence he removed to go into the land of the Philistines, and passed through Samaria. At that time, certain priests, desirous to show their valor, were slain in battle, for that they went out to fight unadvisedly. So Judas turned to Azotus in the land of the Philistines, and when they had pulled down their altars and burned their carved images with fire and spoiled their cities, he returned into the land of Judea. So Judas accomplished what he set out to accomplish, destroyed and broke down the strongholds of these other nations that had sought to join the oppressor at the time in further destroying us, further oppressing us. And Judas got victory because the Lord was with him. You understand? Now, going into chapter 6 of First Maccabees, we're going to get to see the consequences and the repercussions of Israelites standing up and asserting themselves. The consequences and the repercussions of Israelites coming back to the Most High, keeping the law, statutes, and commandments, and fighting for our culture and our heritage. And this is why our oppressor today fights tooth and nail, claws in the dirt, to make sure that we don't come back to the knowledge of who we are and come back to serving the Most High. You understand? It's First Maccabees chapter 6, verse 1. It says, about that time, King Antiochus, traveling through the high countries, heard say that Elamaeus in the country of Persia was a city greatly renowned for riches, silver, and gold, and that there was in it a very rich temple, wherein there were coverings of gold and breastplates and shields, which Alexander, son of Philip, the Macedonian king, who reigned first among the Grecians, had left there. Wherefore he came and sought to take the city and to spoil it, but he was not able, because they of the city, having had warning thereof, rose up against him in battle. So he fled and departed thence with great heaviness and returned to Babylon. So you see, when we began to stand up and fight against the oppressor, then other nations got word of it. Other nations began to stand up and fight against the oppressor. You look at blacks, Latinos, and Native Indians today, our oppressor is able to go and oppress the Asians over there in China and Japan and that Pacific region. Why? Because he's got us subdued. He's able to go over there and oppress the East Indians and rule over them and conquer them and have military bases in their land. Why? Because he has us subdued. He's able to go over there to Africa, you understand, and go kill the leaders in the countries over there, Muammar Gaddafi and Mubarak in Egypt. He can overthrow them. Why? Because he has us in check. You understand? And all these other nations are forced to have to be cordial and forced to have to deal with our oppressor. Why? Because we are held in check. But imagine if we were not in check. Imagine if we rose up, not rose up for the sake of rising up, but rose up to reclaim, you know what I'm saying, our identity and reclaim our heritage as the children of the Most High. Rose up to reestablish ourselves as the 12 tribes and to keep the Most High's law, statutes, and commandments. We got off drugs and we stopped, prostituting our daughters and stopped allowing our sons to kill one another in the streets. Stopped aborting our babies. You understand? Stop depending on our oppressor's culture and his way of life to establish us with some self-esteem and with some dignity. Guess what? We would be able to rise up. We would be able to go forward. We would be able to rise up. And by rising up, we would cause disarray in this place. We would cause the entire empire to fall, because guess what our oppressor can't do? He can't fight us and fight the other nations. He can't keep us subjected. He cannot keep the other nations subjected if he can't keep us subjected. But we have to understand as a nation that we will never be able to rise up and we will never have any success if we don't obey the Most High. If we don't keep the law, statutes, and commandments. There is no revolution without the Most High. There is no rising up without the Most High. There is no escaping from oppression if the Most High is not the one that sanctions it. And in our nation, it has always been the Most High who sanctioned and ordained for revolution. Always been the Most High who sanctioned and ordained, you understand, for our people to be let go. And in this time that we're living in now, it's going to take turn to the Most High for us to be delivered in these times that we are in today. Let me keep going. First Maccabees chapter 6 now, verse 5. Moreover, there came one who brought him tidings into Persia, that the armies which went against the land of Judea were put to flight, and that Lysias, who went forth first with a great power, was driven away of the Jews, and that they were made strong by the armor and power and store of spoils which they had gotten of the armies whom they had destroyed. Also that they had pulled down the abomination which he had set up upon the altar in Jerusalem, and that they had encompassed about the sanctuary with high walls as before, and his city Bethsura. Now when the king heard these words, he was astonished and sore moved, whereupon he laid down upon his bed and fell sick for grief, because it had not befallen him as he looked for. And there he continued many days, for his grief was ever more and more, and he made account that he should die. Wherefore he called for all his friends and said unto them, the sleep is gone from mine eyes, and my heart faileth for very care. And I thought with myself, into what tribulation am I come, and how great a flood of misery is it, wherein now I am. For I was bountiful and beloved in my power. But now I remember the evils that I did at Jerusalem, and that I took all the vessels of gold and silver that were therein, and sent to destroy the inhabitants of Judea without a cause. I perceive, therefore, that for this cause these troubles are come upon me, and behold, I perish through great grief in a strange land. You understand? This is the king Antiochus, who's getting sick. And in getting sick, he realizes that I should have left them children of Israel alone. I should not have sought to destroy them. I should not have sought to, convert them and cause them to lose their heritage and their culture. I should not have done so wickedly. And now I am on my deathbed. Reading on. First Maccabees chapter 6, verse 14. Then called he for Philip, one of his friends, who he made ruler over his realm, and gave him the crown and his robe and his signet, to the end he should bring up his son Antiochus and nourish him for the kingdom. So King Antiochus died there in the 149th year, Now there was several King Antiochus. I believe this is the. I'll get it for sure. Okay, hold on. Bear with me. Because there was during the time of Christ, I believe there was Antiochus Epiphanes. Hold up. Yes, this is Antiochus Epiphanes. Is Antiochus the fourth is the one who we're talking about now. He died, right? And Antiochus the fourth raised up a son. Oh, let me see something. Yeah, Antiochus the fourth raised up a son. Let's see some. Antiochus Epiphanes, Seleucid king of the Hellenistic Syrian kingdom, reigned from 174 to 164. As a ruler, he was best known for his encouragement of Greek culture and institutions. His attempts to suppress Judaism brought on the wars of Maccabees. Right? So his father was Antiochus the Great. He was Antiochus Antiochus the Third the Great. He was Antiochus the Fourth. See some boom. Hold up. Hold on. I'll get it for y'all in a second. Hold on. Hold on, bear with me. Bear with me. So he died of an illness at Tebay in Persis. Punishment for his attempt to loot the shrine. Okay, I can't find it, but his son. So Antiochus Epiphanes was the man who lived during the time of that we're reading about in First Maccabees. Also, to understand that the Antiochus rulership was known as the Seleucid Empire. So we're reading about the Seleucid dynasty or the Seleucid Empire, of which King Antiochus IV was ruling and in power during the time that we're reading about in First Maccabees, the 6th chapter. And then he died. We just read about him dying. He passed the kingdom to Philip to hold the crown until his son Antiochus V, I'm assuming, raised up to power. All right. So reading on. Also, too, the 149th year of the Greek dynasty, the Greek Empire, correlates to the year 164 BC. And you got to remember that in the way Esau keeps time, the years, BC years, count down. You understand? So he came to power about 174, ruled for about 7 years, and it was a 7-year period when all of that hell was taking place, where they were forcing Greek culture on us, forcing us to lose our culture, lose our identity. That happened for about the space of 7 years until Judas Maccabees and the brothers rose up, and that lasted. You know what I'm saying? That revolt lasted for about 3 or 4 years, or 2 or 3 years that Judas had done all of this campaigning to take the land back. Everybody understand? So here we go. First Maccabees 6 and 17. Now, when Lysias knew that the king was dead, he set up Antiochus his son, whom he had brought up being young, to reign in his stead. And his name he called Eupator. About this time that they were in the tower shut up, the Israelites round about the sanctuary and sought always their hurt and the strengthening of the heathen. Wherefore Judas, proposing to destroy them, called all the people together to besiege them. So they came together and besieged them in the 150th year, and he made mounts for shot against them and other engines. Howbeit, certain of them that were besieged gat forth, unto whom some ungodly men of Israel joined themselves. And they went unto the king and said, how long will it be ere thou execute judgment and avenge our brethren? We have been willing to serve thy father and to do as he would have us and to obey his commandments. For which cause they of our nation besieged the tower, and they are alienated from us. Moreover, as many of us as they could light on, they slew and spoiled our inheritance. Neither have they stretched out their hand against us only, but against their borders. And behold, this day are they besieging the tower at Jerusalem to take it. The sanctuary also and Bethsura have they fortified. Wherefore, if thou dost not prevent them quickly, they will do the greater things than these. Neither shalt thou be able to rule them. So here you have sellouts among our people joining with the sellouts of our people who had been joined to these Greeks. They were living comfortably in the land. We came against them and took the land back. They still were living in their part of the land, serving the heathens. But now we started to press against them and started to take that land back. And they went to the king, pledging allegiance to him against their own nation, telling him, if you don't go out and fight them now, man, we're going to die, and none of us are going to have any power. We ain't going to be able to rule them at all. And that's always been a problem in our nation, man. Sellouts it's a plague to blacks, Latinos, and Native Indians. And it has always been the problem, man. The problem, the power struggle of our people. There's brothers and sisters amongst us who would rather be, a white man's pet than to be another black man's partner. They'd rather be the white man's pet than to be another black man's partner. Or they'd rather be the white man's pet than to be a black man's subordinate. You understand? To work under another brother, to have a position under another brother. They'd rather be under that white man and kill their brother than to be under their brother and to be appreciative of his triumph and his glory and his lot in life, man. And it's an evil, disgusting plague that has been a part of our nation since the beginning. And we see it rising in this time, rising up here thousands of years ago. You understand? Reading on First Maccabees chapter 6. Verse 28. Now, when the king heard this, he was angry and gathered together all his friends and the captains of his army and those that had charge of the horse. There came also unto him from other kingdoms and from isles of the sea bands of hired soldiers, so that the number of his army was 100,000 footmen, 20,000 horsemen, and 32 elephants, exercised in battle. These went through Idumea and pitched against Bethsura, which they assaulted many days, making engines of war. But they of Bethsura came out and burned them with fire and fought valiantly. Upon this Judas removed from the tower and pitched in Beth Zacharias over against the king's camp. Then the king, rising very early, marched fiercely with his host towards Beth Zacharias, where his armies made them ready to battle and sounded the trumpets. And to the end they might provoke the elephants to fight, they showed them the blood of grapes and mulberries. Moreover, they divided the beasts among the armies, and for every elephant they appointed 1,000 men, armed with coats of mail, and with helmets of brass on their heads. And beside this, for every beast were ordained 500 horsemen of the best. So the heathen's army was divided amongst these, elephants. You understand? And they fed the elephants mulberries in order to, heighten their aggression, enrage the beasts to want to go into battle. You understand? All right. Okay. First Maccabees 6:36. These were ready at every occasion. Wheresoever the beast was and whithersoever the beast went, they went also. Neither departed they from him. And upon the beasts were there strong towers of wood, which covered every one of them, and were girt fast upon them with devices. There were also upon every one 32 strong men that fought upon them. So this army had elephants covered in armor. And on the back of every elephant was a tower where 32 men could sit and could, shoot arrows, throw rocks. And then around every elephant was 50 horsemen, 200, 200 horsemen, right? No, 500 horsemen around every elephant. And with every elephant was 1,000 men. So they dispatched These damn elephants like goddamn tanks on the battlefield, right? Reading on, verse 38, as for the remnant of the horsemen, they set them on this side and that side at the two parts of the host, giving them signs what to do and being harnessed all over amidst the ranks. Now when the sun shone upon the shields of gold and brass, the mountains glistered therewith and shined like lamps of fire. So part of the king's army being spread upon the high mountains and part on the valleys below, they marched on safely and in order. Wherefore all that heard the noise of their multitude and the marching of the company and the rattling of the harness were moved, for this army was very great and mighty. Then Judas and his host drew near and entered into the battle, and there were slain of the king's army 600 men. So as soon as they went out there to get it on, Judas and his men, like that, killed 600 of these heathens. Verse 43, Eleazar, also surnamed Severan, perceiving that one of the beasts armed with royal harness was higher than all the rest, and supposing that the king was upon him, put himself in jeopardy to the end he might deliver his people and get him a perpetual name. Wherefore he ran upon him courageously through the midst of the battle, slaying on the right hand and on the left, so that they were divided from him on both sides. Which done, he crept under the elephant and thrust him under and slew him. Whereupon the elephant fell down upon him, and there he died. So this one brother, they out there in the battlefield, he's seeing all these elephants, but this one super elephant got a tower super tall. He run out there, he's slicing on the left, slicing on the right. He carved a pathway to get to this elephant with the tall tower. He get under the elephant, stab the elephant, rip his guts out, and then and when he did it, the elephant collapsed and fell on top of him, and the brother died. You understand? Verse 47, howbeit the rest of the Jews, seeing the strength of the king and the violence of his forces, turned away from them. Then the king's army went up to Jerusalem to meet them, and the king pitched his tents against Judea and against Mount Zion. But with them that were in Bethsura he made peace, for they came out of the city because they had no victuals there to endure the siege, it being a year of rest to the land. So the king took Bethsura and set a garrison there to keep it. As for the sanctuary, he besieged it many days, and set there artillery with engines and instruments to cast fire and stones and pieces to cast darts and slings. Whereupon they also made engines against their engines and held them battle a long season. Yet at the last, their vessels being without victuals, for that it was the 7th year, and they in Judea were delivered from the Gentiles, had eaten up the residue of the store. Meaning, so we held on as long as we could, but we ran out of food because we had been in captivity for 7 years under these heathens, you know, and living in dire straits. We didn't have enough in the storehouse to sustain us. You understand? Verse 54, but there were but a few left in the sanctuary, because the famine did so prevail against them, that they were faint to disperse themselves, every man to his own place. At that time, Lysias heard say that Philip, whom Antiochus the king, while he lived, had appointed to bring up his son Antiochus, that he might be king, was turned out of Persia and Media, and the king's host also that went with him, and that he sought to take unto him the ruling of the affairs. Wherefore he went in all haste and said to the king and the captains of the host and the company, we delay, and our victuals are but small, and the place we lay siege unto is strong, and the affairs of the kingdom lie upon us. Now therefore let us be friends with these men, and make peace with them and with all their nation, and covenant with them that they shall live after their laws as they did before, for they are therefore displeased and have done all these things because we abolished their laws. So the heathens are realizing that they ain't got enough to sustain this battle. They're not going to be able to keep up with this war the way they're fighting it. So one of the highest advisors, Lysias, said to the king, man, we need to go ahead and make peace, and we need to get out this battle before it's too late. We got to get out this battle. We need to get back to the capital, take care of the king's business, man, and let these cats be what they're going to be, because that's why they started, let them have their laws, let them keep their identity, because that's why they started fighting in the first place. Verse 60, so the king and the princes were content, wherefore he sent unto them to make peace, and they accepted thereof. Also the king and the princes made an oath unto them, whereupon they went out of the stronghold. Then the king entered into Mount Zion, but when he saw the strength of the place, he broke his oath that he had made and gave commandment to pull down the wall round about. Afterward departed he in all haste and returned unto Antiochia, where he found Philip to be master of the city. So he fought against him and took the city by force. You understand? So we made a deal with this cat, agreed to allow him to come in, but this bastard was not honorable. He did not keep his treaty, did not keep his word, did not allow us to go back, to live peaceably among them. And tomorrow we're going to get into the rest of what took place during this time. Again, we in the 5th day of the feast of Hachaanakah, the rededication of the temple, reading the history of how valiant men, heroic men in that generation rose up to fight against the heathens, fight against our enemies, so that we could stand on the name of the Most High, stand on the law, statutes, and commandments. And we should remember this always, so that in our generation, in our lifetime, when the Lord gives us the opportunity, we can rise to the occasion to show heroism, to show strength, to show honor, to stand and fight or die for our culture, for our King, and for our God. And with that, we're the Israelite School of Universal Practical Knowledge since 1969. The water for all you brothers and sisters tuning in. I'll see y'all tomorrow. Shalom.